As I already mentioned, today we are celebrating the feast of St. Clare, a follower and true friend of St. Francis of Assisi, a follower and true friend of Jesus the Christ. Now, one aspect of Clare's life is that she too, as Francis was, from a very wealthy family. A very wealthy family. And like Francis, she too gave it all up to follow Christ. All up to follow Christ. Not part of it. All up to follow Christ. Both Francis and Clare married holy poverty, and contrary to the norms of our Western culture, both then and now, they became free. Now, can we wrap our heads around that? They gave up all their possessions to become poor, and in doing so, they became free. Now, at this point, we can continue talking about the commands of Christ concerning giving up all our possessions, or we can follow the script of the church for the last 30 or 40 years and talk about sex. Well, the lectionary does not give me the opportunity to talk about sex today. Even biblical literalists don't take these passages of giving up our possessions to follow Jesus literally. But Jesus talks about owning things and letting things rule our lives instead of worshiping God and loving our neighbor. In other words, he tells us to give them up to save ourselves. And he says this many, many times. Sell your possessions and give alms. Make purses for yourselves that do not wear out, an unfailing treasure in heaven, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. And here they are, those beautiful words. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Beautiful words, because they're true. They are so true. Because our hearts generally follow where our treasure is. And that's what Luke has Jesus saying. I didn't make this up. Last week, the gospel lesson was again about possessions. Now, we didn't hear it because we celebrated the Feast of the Transfiguration. But the lectionary was Luke 12:13 through 21. And the story in there is an already rich man had so many crops being harvested that he tore down his existing barns and built larger ones and planned on being set for life. Set for life. We've all said that to ourselves. For whatever reason. On the day his new larger barns were complete, he sat back to watch his wealth multiply and roll in so that he could eat, drink, and be merry. He died that night. Now, all of us know someone who said they were really going to start living, for example, when they got to retire. They worked hard all their lives. And as soon as I retire, my wife and I, my partner and I, are going to start doing everything that we always wanted to do. And we all have heard or know someone that as soon as they retired, either they or their spouse or partner died. When do we start to live? When do we become free? Our culture tells us that a man or woman is free when they can buy anything they want, whenever they want it. That, my friends, is a big fat lie. To Henry David Thoreau is attributed this saying: a man is rich in proportion to the number of things he can afford to let alone. We are free when we aren't controlled by our possessions, contrary to our cultural norms. And for those young adults who are ready to go off to college and ready to start careers, you have some decisions to make. You're being told that you are to make lots of money. Do something that makes lots of money. I tell you here, do something that feeds your passion. And you may be poor. You may not be able to buy all the things you want. But I can tell you that you will be free. And it's worth a lot more than living in a 5-bedroom house by yourself, driving a big fancy car by yourself. Follow your passions, even if they may not make you one dime. Now, I've told some of you this story before. When we sold our house, and Arthur and I sold our house in Decatur so that we could go to seminary in California, I was alone in the house. There wasn't one box left to pick up. And I sat on that box and cried. Because I had given up a career and sold the house that Arthur and I had had our entire relationship in. Now, was I crying for sentimental reasons? Or was I crying because of my house that we had worked so hard on was being sold or had sold at that point? I would say there's some truth to both of those. But I would also add that the bigger component of that, of my crying alone in the house, the empty house, was because I had given up my security. I was afraid. I was asking myself, what have I done? And the hypocrisy in all this for me was that my possessions, other than the house, all went into storage. Went into mini barns. Barns in the basements of friends. Barns in the garages of friends. There they were, waiting 4 more years for me to pick them up and curse them as I moved them again. And then again. And now again. Who is being controlled? I'm being controlled by these things. And I don't mind confessing this to you, because I know for a fact that many of you are doing the same thing. Yesterday, 9 San Franciscans attended the 15th pilgrimage to honor Jonathan Merrick Daniels, whose feast day, I believe, is the 14th, this coming week. Honor Jonathan Merrick Daniels and 10 other martyrs for civil rights that were killed in Alabama. Jonathan Daniels, an Episcopal seminarian in the 1960s at the Episcopal Theological School, now the Episcopal Divinity School in Cambridge, Massachusetts, had just graduated from Virginia Military Institute, VMI. Jonathan was from a solidly middle-class family, upper middle class, in Vermont. His dad was a physician. But his dad had never instilled in Jonathan to seek possessions, because his dad, had never sought to acquire a lot. And Jonathan was a very good student, excelled at what he did or wanted to do. The world was Jonathan's for the taking. It was his on a platter. But he chose to enter into the struggle of others, for civil rights, right here in the good old South. The civil rights of the disenfranchised blacks. On the steps of a grocery store in Hayneville, Alabama, he was shot dead by a wealthy, white, racist, and town leader who never went to jail. Was shot with a 12-gauge shotgun to his stomach. All because he was a white man helping blacks. But you know what? Jonathan Daniels that day died a free man. He gave it all to Christ. He chose to be free so that others might live free as well. And we honor Jonathan. Jonathan is on the calendar of saints and holy women, holy men. In today's gospel, the writer of Luke shares with us the basis of why, when we seek life in possessions, it is to our own folly. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So the question is, does Jesus want us to be poor? It sure seems like it. It seems like it for the right reason. Because we tend to let our possessions and what we own and our empires get in the way of loving God and loving others. Now, I don't think Jesus wants all of us to be poor, to choose to be poor and begging in the streets. But Jesus does want us to be free and not be controlled by things. And my friends, it's very, very easy to be controlled by wanting more and consuming more, and more never becomes enough. Our whole culture, our whole economy is based upon wanting more. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So here's my advice to myself and to you. Make damn sure we know where our treasure is. It's in heaven. We must make a daily conscious effort every day to remember where our treasure is and what our treasure is. It is not our possession. And no one can do this for us. We each have to do it for ourselves. Believe it or not, that is the good news. We lift up Jonathan Myrick Daniels. We lift up St. Francis and St. Clare because Christ was lifted up on the cross. He gave his all for us. They gave their all for Christ. They are our models. They show us how to be free. How to be free on this earthly pilgrimage that is going by way too fast. free to savor God's bounty. The bounty being our life with our Creator. With our Creator now and forever.